I think so much these days about the Great River, that symbol which moves forward among herbs and greenery, and beasts that grazed, and men who sow and harvest. Great tombs, even in small habitations of the dead. That current which goes its way, and which is not so different from the blood of men. Georgios Seferis. Welcome to this week's episode of Warfare, Advancement, Revisionism. My name is Preston Floyd, and as always, I'm your host. I'd like to thank you all for joining me this week. Welcome. And if you are a newcomer, thank you so much for stopping by, listening. I hope you will enjoy the episode and peruse our backlog. And if you're a returning listener, thank you all, as always. Your support means quite a bit to me. Please be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, download, rate 5 stars, all that kind of good stuff on whatever platform you choose to listen to me on. It will help the show grow. For this week's episode, we will be continuing our look at a couple of sites slash material traditions slash cultures in the eastern, or what is now eastern United States, eastern North America, whatever you want to call it. Then we will begin to move back south into, what is still parts of the southwestern United States, as well as northern Mexico and the rest of Mexico. I don't know that we'll finish up all this stuff I want to talk about in Mexico today, but we'll at very least finish up talking about a couple of places here in the eastern U.S., dating between 6 and 4000 BC, BCE, whichever of those you prefer. And again, I just want to remind everyone that these are not the only sites or material traditions present in the eastern portion of North America. And by eastern, I mean basically east of the Mississippi. But these are the ones that are basically have the most that I could find written down about, at least that's easily accessible to me. There are, of course, other sites, and there are peoples who we are not covering. But I don't want you to think that eastern North America is just chock full of dense, unpenetrated woodlands or things like that. There are humans living there. There have been humans living here for quite some time, though probably in much smaller numbers than in the rest of the Americas, or at least the rest of North America. But we'll go over that in the future. For now, though, we're going to turn to a site in what is now Benton County, Tennessee, USA. And this is the site known as the Ava site. That's EVA. Now, I'm not sure exactly when this site was first discovered, but I believe it is right before it was excavated. And that happened in the 1940s. During that period, the Tennessee River was going to be dammed to form the Kentucky Lake. Now, while that work was being done, they discovered the site, and archaeologists from the University of Tennessee nearby came, and they did several excavations between I think it was like September and November of 1940. Although I don't think the lake was actually finished until 45. So I think that was actually pretty well excavated before the area was flooded by the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is one of those organizations created during the New Deal during the 30s and 40s. But regardless, because of the location, which was right on a floodplain, right beside the Tennessee River, the site actually had great, easily definable layers of mud and soil that really helped, kind of show how things had changed over time. Also, they did a really good job of documenting where everything was found and at what layer. So when radiocarbon dating came along, they were easily able to radiocarbon date some antlers and some other bioorganic material that kind of help put things on a very clear timeline. And it's very definitive. It's actually a great opportunity, or it was a great example, I should say, of what life was like in this area, or how the material cultures in the area evolved and changed over time, and they were easily able to place them on a timeline. So that was actually very useful. Now, that's not to say it's perfect dating. There could be a difference of 100 years or so, give or take. There's also a period where there's a lot less occupation of the site, and how long that lasted exactly is a little hard to say. But by and large, with the a couple of centuries one way or the other at a couple of points, it's fairly clear cut. How the people living there were living. And this site was more or less continually occupied, again, with the couple of exceptions that I mentioned, for between about 6,000 to about 6,000 BC to about 1,000 BC. Some people think it may have been as late as 500 BC, but again, at that point, it would have been much less regularly occupied, or occupied by far fewer individuals. Or I guess I should say used by far fewer individuals. Now, I should go ahead and point out that there were artifacts found prior to that point, or that could be dated prior to 6,000 BC. However, these are very, very scant. There's only a handful. And they resemble the Clovis-style tools, which we've talked about, the Clovis culture and the controversy surrounding them. But it does appear that the Clovis, or descendants of the Clovis culture, or people at least who were heavily influenced by the Clovis culture, did live in and around this area. They probably, they definitely traveled up and down the Mississippi and various rivers connected to that system. The Ohio River, which the Tennessee River is also connected to, definitely had people traveling all around it during the Clovis period, and probably prior to the Clovis period as well. Though again, how much that's happening and how many people are doing that, it's very hard to say at this point. Now, as I was saying, the site was divided into 6 zones or strata. There was the top layer, or the plow zone. That's not numbered, but then you have strata 1 to 5, with 5 being the earliest evidence of large-scale or long-term occupation and use of the site. Now, strata 1 is associated with the kind of the end phase. That appears to have been used by people belonging to the big sandy material culture, and we'll talk about them in the future. But again, that dates to roughly around 2000 to about 1000 BC, or as some people claim, about 500 BC. Then you have strata 2, which is associated with a material culture that's apparently referred to as the 3 Mile culture. I could find nothing Googling them and looking it up. Every time I did it, I kept getting results for 3 Mile Island, the nuclear disaster back in the 70s, or the narrowly averted nuclear disaster. So bear that in mind. I'm going to continue to look into them. Thankfully, they don't really show up during the season, so I have time to find out about them. And then you have stratum 3, which shows the site very, very lightly used. There's almost no tools or anything like that during this time period. And it's kind of basically around 4,000 to about 2,000. The site is occupied very, very sporadically. The strata that most concerns us today, though, is stratum 4 and 5, and this material culture is sometimes referred to as the Ava culture from the site. Now, as for the name Ava, I looked into it. I couldn't find a firm answer, but there's I guess the sand around it is known as the Ava Beach. That's referring to like the sandy shore around the Kentucky Lake. Prior to that, I think it was probably also called like the Ava Beach or maybe the Ava Bar, something along those lines. But I could not get a definitive answer on that. But I do know that the name of the lake that the site is now submerged under is known as Ava Beach. Now, for Stratum 5, the lowest layer, again, right around 6000 BC, you begin to see different points from the earlier kind of Clovis-inspired or Clovis-descended points. And again, they're kind of spotty at this earlier point, but as time goes on, you begin to see more regular use and the artifacts evolving to right around 5200 BC. And at that point, you begin to see a lot of different tools made from stone, bones, and antler. Now, the stone is primarily flint and chert, and that was used to make projectile points, blades, things used to butcher animals, and they also would create weights for the atlats or atl. They would even make kind of polished stone, what are believed to be gorges, the things you wear around your neck, as well as mortar and pestles and other, food preparation tools. The bone artifacts are things used for a little bit more delicate work. Owls, needles, fish hooks were also a big bone. They would use bone to create their fishing hooks. They also did create some jewelry or decorations with skeletons as well. They found a necklace made of snake vertebrae, which is very badass. But and then you also have antler artifacts, which they would use also for projectile points, but they'd also use them to create scrapers as well as other types of decoration. And it was the antlers that were able to be radiocarbon dated, which, again, helped date the site. Now, the fourth stratum kind of goes from about 5,000 to about 4,000 BC, which is, again, when you begin to see the site being used less. Now, the same types of tools that were there prior are still there in abundance, though, again, as time goes on, there are less and less, and there is more and more evidence that the people living there were having to go further and further away to hunt enough game and that kind of thing, which might explain why the site was eventually, temporarily, abandoned. Now, there were also a large number of human burials discovered at the Ava site, around 180. Unfortunately, I could not find in the article I read on Tennessee's encyclopedia page about the site where or when most of these skeleton or the remains were interred, if they came from a specific time or strata. From what I gather, it does appear that this location was used for burials during all of these various phases. Now, in total, they discovered 29 infants buried there, 11 children, 7 teens, and about 133 adults. And most of the adults were younger than 45 years old, although there were a couple of instances of individuals who were probably in their 70s. So those individuals must have been very highly respected or, extremely wizened, especially at that period of time. Now, for the earliest phase, they have been able to do testing. I think they've been able to test all of them. But the individuals buried in the fifth and the fourth strata, which again is the primary subject that we're focusing on for this season, they are very closely related to other individuals across what is now the southeastern United States. So, and also related to the Clovis people, which again, we've talked about Clovis, and while there are controversies, it's hard to deny that large portions of the Native American population in the U.S. are all related, at least in some way, to the Clovis culture. There were also dogs buried at the site, around 20, though from what I gather, it does appear that that they're part of later interrals. But the site apparently served as kind of a large campsite slash production area for tools and things like that, and probably also served as kind of like a maybe an area to inter several groups dead, as a way of maybe maintaining familial ties between several bands. So this could have been like a seasonal or a semi-seasonal gathering point for a number of related groups, at least at this early stage. And then we'll talk more about the later stages when we begin to discuss the cultures that will eventually occupy the site. The Mississippian period is associated with this, as well as the Woodland period and Big Sandy as well. And I'm having to make a lot of quick cuts. I apologize for that. If you guys are hearing the clicks, I'm trying to cut those out. But someone is apparently drag racing down the road, and also there are several different types of sirens going by. So I'm assuming if the drag racers haven't caused an accident, there are other accidents on the road. So apologies for those quick cuts there. Now, the next material culture we're going to be discussing is known as the Mount Taylor culture, also sometimes just referred to as the Mount Taylor period. This focuses on what is now northeastern Florida. And it basically, this culture occupied a large stretch of the St. Johns River. And this kind of runs it's a very wide water system, but it kind of runs parallel to Florida's Atlantic seaboard. But it's not directly on the ocean, but it does feed into that, and there are connections between the ocean and these waterways. Now, this culture is dated somewhere between 5,000 to 4,000 BC. The dates are debated, and it lasts to about 2,000 BCE. I'm going to go ahead and cover them kind of in their entirety, not because for any specific reason, but the culture is pretty much a monolith. It doesn't undergo massive amounts of changes, even in this later period. When it ends, it eventually is replaced by what's known as the Orange period, or the Orange culture, and we'll talk more about that later. But they're pretty set in their ways, essentially. Basically, for 3,000 to 2,000 years, they're kind of living the same lifestyle. There's not a huge amount of shake-up in their material culture. At the very end of this culture, they do, well, not the end, but they do eventually add ceramics to their tool set. And it's at that point, conventionally speaking, that the Orange period is said to have begun. But when that fiber-tempered ceramics that they're making kind of come into play is a little bit debated. Some people put it around 4,000, but then they say the culture still lasts. But then it also says that they're a pre-ceramic culture, so as soon as they get the ceramics, you enter the Orange period. But regardless, there does appear to be some level of continuity between the populations of the Mount Taylor culture and the Orange culture, which is why typically it's sometimes just referred to as the Mount Taylor period and the Orange period. The Orange period is when ceramics become kind of ubiquitous at their sites, and prior to that, the pre-ceramic period is known as the Mount Taylor period. And I'm sure I confused you with that because it kind of confuses me a little, but if you guys have any questions about that, just let me know. But one of the big things that stands out about the Mount Taylor period, or the Mount Taylor culture is large shell middens. Almost all of their sites, you find a huge amount of different types of shells from animals that they were eating. You've got various types of snail shells, river snails, apple snails, mussels, oysters, clams, all that kind of stuff is a big part of their diet, as well, of course, as local fauna or flora and fauna as well. You also, towards the end of the Mount Taylor period, and some people have put forward the theory that this development should actually signal a change from the Mount Taylor period to an intermediate period between the Mount Taylor and the Orange period. But this is burial mounds. They begin to bury their dead in these mounds built up of earth. And these are the oldest known burials in what is now Florida. So technologically speaking, they're very much, very consistent, very static. They don't really add too much tools to their repertoire until you get to the part where they're creating very early stage ceramics. And again, that is typically associated with the Orange period, but this is a process that does begin towards the end of the Mount Taylor period. And they're also eventually building these, I wouldn't say monumental tombs. The mounds aren't massive, but they're a decent size. And it is a change. So they are undergoing cultural changes, if not material changes, I guess is the best way to put that. But that's what we have for the Mount Taylor period. Not a huge amount to go off of, but it is one of the more noticeable material cultures in the eastern United States. That is different from your standard hunting and gathering that you see kind of at other places. Now, there is some thought that we may have lost some larger Mount Taylor sites that may have been a little bit closer to the coasts, to rising sea levels. But unfortunately, no evidence of this no definitive evidence of this has been found. But due to the fact that, Mount Taylor kind of comes up very quickly, without showing a kind of a development in the area, there is speculation that they were much more coastal before they moved a little bit more inland up the rivers. But again, speculative, but I do think it's a good theory, and it wouldn't surprise me if someday they do some offshore archaeology and find more evidence of that. But that remains to be seen. Now, we will be moving back to the southwest in the U.S. / Midwest, and then we'll be moving back down, or be moving down into northern Mexico before we're continuing south. So there's one culture that I need to cover before we begin to continue south, and that is the Oshara tradition, as opposed to culture. Probably a little bit more accurate. Now, this is a very long-lasting tradition, and it's divided into it depends on the archaeologist and who you're talking to, but at the minimum, it's no more than 6 phases. Some people term them differently, organize them a little bit differently on time period, but for our purposes, we'll be focusing on the first phase and the beginning of the second phase, and that is known as the J phase and the Bahada phase. Now, one thing I should note is the environment at this time in the American Southwest is a little bit different than it is today. Most people, when they think of the American Southwest, they think of dry deserts. That's accurate. It's accurate at this time too. However, there are periods when it is very green. And in this earlier period, it was probably more green more often, not quite as arid. And there reasons that this changes, but we'll get more into that later. But it's not quite as dry as often during these phases. In fact, I think it doesn't really kind of reach how it is today until about 1,500 years ago, give or take. It might be a little bit more than that, but right around the time actually that the Oshara tradition is thought to have evolved into the next phase of lifestyle in the area. So just keep that in mind. Also keep in mind that some of these phases do overlap with each other at different, in different areas, and some places enter different phases at different times. Keep all that in mind. And the Oshara people exist in what is today southwestern U.S., New Mexico, Colorado, those areas. There are also other material traditions that we'll be discussing that neighbor the Oshara, and in some cases overlap in some areas at various times. And most of those are going to be to the south of the Oshara. They're sometimes referred to as the northern tradition. Now, the J phase, the first phase of the Oshara tradition, emerges about 5,400, 5,500, somewhere around there, and then it goes to about 4,700, 4,600, somewhere in that time frame. And this is distinct from the earlier Paleo Indians in the area. They change how they are, or what tools they're using to hunt. They begin to make longer, more narrow projectile points. This probably signifies some type of shift away from primarily hunting larger animals like the bison. They may have focused on smaller, more agile animals, but they probably did still, of course, try to hunt and trap bison in areas. Most of their campsites, you usually find them in entrances to canyons, also known as canyon heads. Also, as time goes on, they do develop different types of points for their various projectiles, spears that they use, spear throwers, bows and arrows. However, they never get rid of their the longer, narrower points. Those never disappear completely. They begin to add more variety to their projectile points as time goes on, as they begin to expand, I guess, the hunting and the fighting that they have to do. Now, they do still use tools very similar to the older Paleo Indian tradition. When you think of things like for food processing, butchering tools, things like that, they still use larger, less polished stone for that. Now, shifting into the second phase, the Bahata phase, that's about 4,700, 4,600 to about 3,100. They have many more sites. Their population expands. They spread out over a much larger area at any given time. So they're very successful in that J phase. That their techniques are useful and very well suited to their environment, which makes sense. That's something you see in a lot of hunter-gatherer societies that stay in generally the same area for a long period of time. Also, they begin to change how their the layout of their ovens and their hearths in their sites. They're much better made. They're larger than in that earlier J phase. Now, this is again where we kind of butt up to one of the issues with the dating. There is another phase that also starts at the same time as the Bahata phase, and that is the San Jose phase. And as you might guess, that name comes from a site in New Mexico. Now, both the Bajada and the San Jose phase, they share similarities to the earlier J phase, and they basically kind of develop separately, but they also still have close contacts with one another. But the San Jose sites also include a lot of metates and manos, which we saw in the milling stone tradition. So they are probably getting influenced or trading with the milling stone tradition people, or people who had also been influenced by the milling stone tradition. But there is apparently some level still of cultural connection between Bajada sites and San Jose sites. And again, there's back and forth on this. Some sites kind of change and expand at different times. Also, the San Jose sites, they also see a increase in both size of sites and the number of sites, the same as the Bajada phase. But the San Jose sites also, they have found a lot of trash heaps nearby, which is not something you see at the earlier Bajada and J sites. So the San Jose sites may have been a little bit better off, materially speaking, if just as they didn't have to be quite as frugal necessarily with their material. Now, there is more to talk about with the Oshara tradition peoples, but that will be for next season. Maize will begin to move into the area, and it will be cultivated by peoples from the Bajada and the San Jose sites, and we'll talk more about them later. Now, I do want to point out that the ancient Pueblans are mostly thought to descend from the Oshara people, or at least the Oshara people contribute the most to what will eventually become the ancient Pueblan people, and we'll talk more about them later. Another group that probably influenced the Oshara, and who the Oshara are probably related to, is the Picosa culture. Now this spans parts of California, Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, Colorado, as well as I believe some of northern northwest Mexico. Now, the dates on them are kind of all over the place because they were fairly widespread, and they had a lot of regional variation. There are some in San Pedro, as well as the Cochise tradition, which is in Arizona. The name comes from Cochise County. And they had another couple of them, the Pinto Basin, which I believe is New Mexico as well. But they're fairly widespread. And in some areas, especially in New Mexico, Colorado, they were probably the immediate predecessors of the Oshara. But as the Oshara, I guess broke away or developed separately in New Mexico and Colorado, the other traditions that belong to the Picosa kind of continue on. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot that I could find about the Picosa, but again, they do exist, at least in some areas, during this season. Now, some of the traditions belonging to the Picosa are better documented than others. The Cochise tradition is probably the best known, at least in America, and they are thought to have been, I guess, the precursors of the Mimbres and the Hohokam traditions that emerge in those areas later. And they're divided into three phases. There's the Cochise phase of the Cochise tradition. Then next season we'll be discussing it's the Chiricahua phase, and that we'll get into next season. Now, I think that is a good stopping point for this week. Next week we'll be back and we'll be moving into mostly Mexico. There is still some overlap to the American Southwest for a couple of those groups that we'll be talking about. And like the American Southwest, kind of northern, what is now northern Mexico, is a little bit greener than it would be today, though again there are still dry periods in this area, though maybe not quite as bad as it is in today's time. And the term, actually, there is a nice ecological term for this kind of desert. It's arid America, like arid America. And this is kind of like going to be one of the big challenges as time goes on with the spread of agriculture north through there. Now there are, again, places that agriculture works just fine in, mostly along rivers and things like that. But it is kind of a break between what you would consider classical pre-Columbian America's civilizations, in what is now Mexico, and the more mobile groups, more traditional hunter-gatherer / incipient agriculture that you'll see in other areas. So these places will never reach kind of that same level of population density or anything like that, even though, again, conditions aren't quite as bad as it was or as it is today. It's sort of like the Sahara in Africa. Not that bad, but it does kind of create a break in how technology spreads. Doesn't stop it, but it does slow it down and make things a little, slower in spreading. But yeah, so I think that's this week's episode. If you guys have any questions, comments, constructive criticism, please let me know. And if you have any sources that you can link about any of these peoples that you'd like me to talk about, I'd be glad to do so. Some of this is kind of hard to find. Some of the stuff for the Picosa culture is old at this point, at least academically speaking. I think the most recent thing I was really able to read on them was in 98 or 99. And I know work's still done. The Oshara tradition, actually, there's a very good website. It's Crow Canyon, crowcanyon.org. They have a lot of really good information there. They have a very good video from YouTube. It's a pretty good. It's about an hour long. They do a nice little kind of breakdown. They go by the different numbers of point types over various periods of time, and it was very interesting. Very good read. And that is also Crow Canyon Archaeological Center on YouTube as well. Recommend you guys check that channel out. But yeah, so again, constructive comments, all that kind of good stuff. You can reach me via email at waradrevpod@gmail.com. You can direct message me on X/Twitter. You can also comment on the YouTube videos. I also stream on YouTube during the week. You can catch me live as I get frustrated playing video games and talking to people in chat. And you're free to drop by and say hey there as well if I'm live. You won't be able to send me any links in YouTube chat because YouTube doesn't let people do that, which is probably a good idea. But, you can at least give me an author's name, title of the article, anything like that. But, yeah, we're almost at 420 YouTube subscribers. And, of course, the audio platforms are doing good as always, seeing steady growth there. So I appreciate all of you guys listening, downloading, liking, subscribing, all that kind of good stuff. But anyway, we'll be back next week at the regular time. There may not be an episode the following weekend for Easter. I'm still trying to work out my travel plans for that, so maybe a week off, we'll see. But I'll be sure to let you guys know next week for sure. But in the meantime, I hope you have a good rest of your day and week from whenever you listen to this. And we'll see everyone next time. Peace.